Hello everybody, welcome back to another review, and this time we're talking about Suicide Squad numbers 59 through 66, which is the final set of issues in John Ostrander's original run on Suicide Squad. Now, during Blackest Night, there was a good number of old ongoing titles, particularly from the 80s and the 90s, that got one final issue. So The Question got one, Suicide Squad got one, can't think of anything else off the top of my head. I think Starman got one, and basically all it did was it brought back the original creative team of that book, and sort of told one last story where that set of characters combated the Blackest Night. And so Suicide Squad got one with issue 67, and it basically tied into the Dances Macabre arc of Secret Six at the time, and it was co-written by Ostrander and Gail Simone. We won't talk about that here. We'll wait until we get to Secret Six later down the line to talk about that particular issue. So we're just going to talk about the original end to Volume 1. So by issue 60, rumors had started circulating that Suicide Squad was getting canceled, and the sales just weren't maintaining the book. They didn't want to announce it for a while. They didn't want to cause any sort of drop in sales if they said they were going to cut it off at this point, and they pushed it as long as they could. The furthest Ostrander could get was issue 66. So he had to kind of cap off his story relatively quickly, and there's a couple points here and there that we don't really get any resolution to because of it, but by and large we do get resolved as much of it as we can. So this original final set of issues basically just exists to finalize some of the character stuff, particularly with Deadshot, Waller, Bronze Tiger, and Vertigo. And we do finally get the resolution to the Adam Cray Adam stuff, and we'll just go ahead and start there because that's where this basically picks up. So the big suspicion for a while was that when Ray Palmer died, Batman now realizes that Amanda Waller knew of the explosion before it happened. So he's trying to track her down, and the Suicide Squad's going after a mission to kill or capture a former head of state. And while they go to get him, there's another team that resembles the Suicide Squad going after the same person in the Justice League there as well to try and capture the Suicide Squad. All in an attempt to find out what's going on with the Atom. And what we learn is that the new guy, Adam Cray, is actually the son of Senator Cray, who was killed by Deadshot back in issue 22. And what we have is a group of people that Ray Palmer dealt with and punished them by permanently shrinking them all to about 6 inches. They're trying to get revenge on the Atom and thinking Adam Cray is actually Ray Palmer. And they end up killing him, and then the real Ray Palmer comes out and beats them all up and kind of saves the day more for the most part. But in him trying to do so, his informant, the one guy that could tell him all the information he needed to know about this other type of Suicide Squad running around, gets killed by that said second squad. And so the Atom stuff kind of just fizzles out there. We don't actually get any sort of explanation or any sort of a history or detail about the history of these people that Ray Palmer dealt with, or why he or how he was undercover with them all this time. That's all other side book Justice League stuff. It doesn't really play much into Suicide Squad, but I imagine Ostrander would have rolled with it a little bit more, and I'm sure the stuff with Batman, Waller, and Ray Palmer would have been gone into a little bit more detail had the book gotten a few more issues, because as it stands, it feels kind of tacked on. The ending is not wholly satisfying because Adam Cray does end up dying, and we don't really get a lot with him character-wise or emotionally, aside from one interesting moment where Adam Cray confronts Deadshot, and he says, "You killed my father," and Deadshot says, "Everyone I killed had fathers, and yours was one of the worst, so I'm not sorry, and I would have killed him again." And Cray tells him that, "I didn't like my father very much either, but it still doesn't give you the right to kill him, so you owe me, and you owe my family." And Deadshot pretty stubbornly just says, "Okay, when you figure out what I owe you and how you want to collect it, let me know, and I'll give you one free shot," and that's it. and then just walks away and just takes it in stride because he's Deadshot, and it's kind of awesome. And Boomerang goes to Adam and says that, well, Deadshot's kind of after me as well for making him kill the costume a few issues ago, so maybe we should team up and try and take out Deadshot. And that doesn't really go anywhere. Boomerang and the Atom work together to trap this group of people that eventually gets the Atom killed, but we don't get a lot of resolution to what they were going to how they were going to handle Deadshot particularly. So all that gets wrapped up pretty quickly, and the next big thing we get is before the big final story arc, which takes place in a South American country which resembles Cuba a little bit, although if it is supposed to be Cuba, the way Ostrander is presenting it isn't consistent with the way his politics have been so far, so I imagine it's just some other country, another South American country that was overthrown and a dictator was installed by America during the Cold War, since that seems to be the big recurring theme here. Right before they go on down to that mission, Deadshot gets a package in the mail, and it's from Henry Ducard, who gives him back his old costume, and we find out that Captain Boomerang actually went out to France, talked to Ducard, and got him sent back to hopefully have Deadshot off his back, and it doesn't really work. But Deadshot just really quickly shrugging his shoulders and saying what the hell, decides to put the costume back on, and it's still got the hole from when he shot the imposter in the head. And this is my one big criticism. This is the first time I've actually had any big problems with character stuff. Now, Deadshot's character work has been really vague through most of the book. Deadshot's psychology is handled really subtly. It's handled really sporadically throughout the book. He's not necessarily in every issue. He doesn't necessarily get stuff to do in every arc, even though he is there. So you have to really pay attention and be really careful to mind the details when you're reading something with Deadshot. And I'm okay with it being a little bit vague, because there's usually enough evidence to give you like a nice, interesting character arc. And Deadshot getting back the costume leads into a really interesting thematic idea by the end of the series. But his shrugging his shoulders, what the hell, let me put on the costume attitude, is something I'm still a little bit fuzzy on, and I wish Ostrander put that into a little bit more detail, because it took him a little while. It took him a few minutes, a few panels to shake himself and kill the guy who's stealing his costume. So him getting it back and then just putting it on within one panel, as opposed to at least giving us a few minutes where he contemplates it, I think is a bad idea. I think there should have at least been one more issue before he decided to put the costume on, if not just one more page. And that's the big issue, but we'll talk about how it's handled a little bit better as we go on. So there's a new Task Force X, and basically what we're dealing with here is Amanda Waller's example. The government has said that now that you don't work for us anymore, we followed your lead, and you were ahead of your time with the way you used metahumans, and you were ahead of your time with how the Cold War just led to more spying. So we created our own Suicide Squad, and they're far more lethal. And Waller realizes that her actions do have a negative impact on the world, and she gets really tired and really frustrated about it. And in a decision that's really reminiscent of the storyline right before the Phoenix Gambit, Waller decides to go on this final mission to take out this imposter Suicide Squad, but it very much just reads as she's finally kind of seeing the error of her ways, that this big stubborn nature she has, this need for control, did good, but it also did a lot of bad, and you don't want to encourage people to end up being like you, because after all, if you had a choice, you wouldn't have wound up like you either. So you should not permeate the culture with that kind of worldview. So she takes that whole thing really personally. And she's really forward thinking about some of that stuff. There's a moment here where Poison Ivy says that I mind control men, and it's completely immoral and evil, but if some guy mind controls a woman, then it turns out to be sexy. And Waller just shoots her down and says, no, don't act like you're some kind of feminist. Her words exactly, don't act like you're a feminist, because what you're doing is just an excuse to justify your behavior and not an actual forward-thinking motion. And so you get this message from this woman whose entire life has been about working for control, being pushed away from that control, and trying to reassert it in her life as much as possible. Now facing people that live by the examples that she started, and she doesn't like that example, and so her need for control turned out to be something that she doesn't want in the first place anymore. And it comes out really well in the Ivy stuff, because we talk about sexism there, and it ties back into the great stuff we did with racism earlier about how the distribution of power forces people to look at things in those skewed perspectives of you think you're progressive, but you're really just making excuses, and that there's a difference between actual progressive thought and what people like Ivy and Sergeant Steele have been doing. As Waller gets all this together, the squad has to travel through a forest to get to the leader of this country that they have to kill. And to get to this leader, they have to get through this forest. It's got these weird magical properties, and so the whole squad starts to see strange things. Boomerang starts to see everyone that calls him useless, and he keeps wanting to kill them, so he's in denial about his reputation and about his personality. Bronze Tiger sees the League of Assassins mind-control Bronze Tiger that he used to be, and he unmasks him, and he sees the younger, angrier Ben Turner inside, and he's able to embrace himself. Nightshade walks through the forest and sees all of this Enchantress stuff, and her doubts about her being able to maintain who she is. Waller walks through this forest, and she sees hung bodies all over the place, about the people that she's gotten killed, and how she holds on to that conscience, but she still powers through it because Amanda Waller has to be the person to take it. She has to be the wall. And Deadshot walks through the forest, and he's a constant force. That he is absolutely and utterly the immoralist in order to make something out of morality in the first place. And so he's just able to walk through. He is sure of himself, he understands his life, and he puts on the costume again to give us a sense of constant constant motion, and I think that's really interesting. The Deadshot's finally gotten to this place where he's just sort of embracing things, that he's not haunted by anything anymore. He doesn't call Waller Mama Waller anymore. He doesn't have any Big Brother character to look up to anymore. Now he's just Floyd Lawton, and as Floyd Lawton, he still does what Deadshot does, so might as well put on the costume, and calling back to the whole what the hell moment. And now he's just Deadshot. He just keeps going that way, and he's not anchored into anything anymore, and I think that's immediately interesting. And this all goes back a little bit to the Count Vertigo stuff, which we'll touch on last. But the thing that ends the storyline, when we get to this final dictator, Amanda Waller tricks him into thinking that she has the power to kill people with a touch. And so this guy has been staying alive through a psychic power that he has, where he's just willing himself to life because he thinks he can't die. And Amanda Waller shatters that illusionment. And so his death symbolizes the end of the Suicide Squad, and this whole idea that doubt and fear and intimidation is enough to make people keep going, but it's not the same thing as actually living. And Waller finally realizes that, and she gets tired by the end of it, and she's invited to help run this new country along with Bronze Tiger, and they decide they want to make it better. They decide they want to do something with it that's a lot more pure than what the United States government did or anyone else during the Cold War. And it's a really interesting, really sad moment where Waller almost kind of becomes a good guy by the end of it. And to finish everything out, we have Count Vertigo, who earlier in a previous wave of issues asked Deadshot, because he suffers from manic depressive disorder, to kill him if he ever asks. Vertigo says very specifically that if I ask you, Deadshot, to shoot and kill me, will you do it? And Deadshot says, sure, just let me know when. And Deadshot's been getting kind of impatient about it, because Deadshot does have a death wish, but he wants to die on his own terms. He wants to die by his own mistakes and by his own choices. He doesn't want to end up dead just because Vertigo is having one of his episodes, as he calls it. And so he's been pushing Vertigo more and more to get there. And Vertigo realizes that after being mind controlled by Poison Ivy, as well as being drugged by revolutionaries in his own country, there was a chemical imbalance in his system that fixed his manic depressive disorder. So now his body is used to being both energetic and sad in different intervals, but there's no physiological reason for it anymore. So now he just has to overcome and be a person, but he isn't sure if he can do that. So he goes and asks Deadshot and says, okay, let's finally settle this. And they go out to this wide open field, and he asks Deadshot, do you believe in God? And Deadshot says no. And he says, do you believe in heaven or hell? And Deadshot says no. And he finishes out by saying that I do believe in heaven and hell, and to kill myself would be the ultimate sin. That's why I'm having you do it. I know it's a petty distinction, but God is all about petty distinctions. And I'm thinking that I've been so indecisive about all of this, that my whole life has been control taken away from me, and now I'm in a position where even my body rejects what my will is telling me to do, and my will is now just a product of what my body is habitually forcing me to do. So I'm thinking, now that I'm staring down the barrel of your gun, am I able to make a decision? And Deadshot says, well, are you? Do you want me to kill you or not? And you get one panel where he's still pointing the gun in silence, another panel where he's still pointing the gun in silence, another panel where he's pointing the gun, and Vertigo says no. Final panel, they're both gone, and it's the end of the book. And if that's not the most perfect way to end a book called Suicide Squad, I don't know what is. It's not a perfect final arc. There are things here and there with Boomerang and Deadshot, some of the stuff with the costume, a little bit of too much of a happy ending in regards to both Waller and Vertigo, that clearly just come as a symptom of this book having to force its way to a final conclusion, and we don't really know what Ostrander would have done had he kept going. And the Suicide Squad would appear sporadically throughout DC history for a little bit longer before they get a new series under the guy who wrote Justice League International, which got canceled. His Suicide book got canceled as well. Then Ostrander would come back and do Raise the Flag, and then we'd have Secret Six. And so Suicide Squad had a really weird legacy after this. It never got the strong 60-issue run again. And even in the late 80s, early 90s, a book lasting this long under one writer was a big deal. So we don't get the best conclusion we could have by the end of this run, but we still get a really satisfying ending. And I think the final issue more than makes up for some of the shortcuts and some of the easy ways we handle the Ray Palmer and the Adam Cray and the Boomerang stuff. And the main reason I decided to read Suicide Squad in the first place is because I found Deadshot to be so fascinating. And I think in that way, I'm really satisfied. But also, I found so many other characters to latch onto. Bronze Tiger is absolutely amazing. Amanda Waller is a great character. And we had some great stuff here and there with Nightshade and Nemesis, and Rick Flag is amazing. And these characters' deaths really mean something. They're all used effectively, and it's just a great reading experience. I'd highly recommend people go in and buy the Suicide Squad trades that have been reprinted. Try and collect the issues if you can. It's just a fantastic run overall. It's a book that constantly gets better, and it's really sad that it got cut off before its time. But I think even now, even in this day and age, there's a lot of stuff that Suicide Squad talked about in the late 80s and early 90s that is still extremely relevant and is absolutely ahead of its time. It's a great book through and through. It's got fantastic art through and through. It's got fantastic writing through and through. You do have to be wary about crossovers here and there, the Janus Directive particularly, which I just didn't like at all. And then that first wave of 20 issues where almost every other issue you'd have some kind of crossover that didn't really pertain to this main book. So it's a tough hurdle to get over, but overall it's a fantastic run, and I highly recommend checking it out. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, whether you agree or disagree with anything I said. What do you think of Suicide Squad? If you ever had a favorite character, if you're thinking about reading this after all these reviews or not. Thanks everybody for listening, and I'll see you next time with another review.